Chapter 13. Baiting a Thief. George frowned. "You're not going to try getting into this place now, are you?" "No," said Nancy. "I'd probably end up a prisoner." She thought of the old lady who was being held against her will. "It's getting late," Bess put in. "We'd better go back to the Cornings." "Yes," Nancy agreed reluctantly. "We have our work cut out for us tonight." "Why don't you just tell the police where the sanatorium is?" Bess asked nervously. "Let them rescue Mrs. Eldridge." Nancy shook her head. "We must get her to safety before the police raid starts. Otherwise, the gang might harm the poor woman to keep her from talking. We'll have to find out exactly where they're keeping her prisoner in the mansion." "It's such a big house," Bess said gloomily. "Mrs. Eldridge might be hard to find." "It's also possible she's not here anymore," George said. "The gang knows the police are after them, and they may have moved her." When they reached the car, Nancy hid in the back again, and George drove. At the Cornings, Bess was asked to go in first and make sure Morgan was in his room. "No use having him learn my secret," Nancy remarked. "Thorne might get it out of him before I'm ready to have it known." Learning the coast was clear, she scooted up to her room. Mrs. Corning had dinner ready, so a tray was prepared for Nancy. The others ate in the dining room, then went upstairs. "Now, tell us your plan for capturing the thieves, if they come," Mr. Corning urged. Nancy said, "Here it is. First, remember that the Crystal Garden room has 2 doors, one to the hall, the other to the TV room. Each has a key that's now on the inside." Her host nodded. Nancy went on. "The boys will be outside. Dave will be watching in the shrubs bordering the flagstone area, Bert at the top of the patch which leads to the dock, and Ned on the garage roof. As soon as the thief or thieves enters the house, Ned will signal with a walkie-talkie to Mr. Dennis at the camp, and he will call the police. Meanwhile, Bert and Dave will be ready to tackle anybody watching on the outside. We girls will lock any intruders in the crystal room." "But suppose they see you?" Mrs. Corning asked. "They won't," said Nancy. "Bess and George will hide across the hall in the kitchen. I'll be in the TV room. As soon as the thieves enter, I'll lock the adjoining door. At the same time, the girls will slip across the hall and quietly lock that door." Mr. Corning asked what he and his wife should do. "I suggest you go to your room as usual," Nancy replied. "That will cause less suspicion." At 9 o'clock, the lights were put out on the first floor. The couple retired, and the girls took their posts. Nancy held the door to the crystal room open a crack, put the key on the outside of the lock, and watched. It seemed that she stood for ages before the other door opened. There was a click, and the light went on in the glass cabinet. Nancy gripped the key, ready to shut the door. Suddenly, she froze. Only one figure approached the cabinet. Morgan! A thief! He was carrying a large suitcase, which he put on the floor. Nancy watched, hardly daring to breathe, as he took a small tool from his pocket and picked at the cabinet lock. A few minutes later, he pulled the glass door open. Then he swung back the lid of the suitcase. Nancy saw that it was divided into compartments and heavily padded with velvet. A special carrying case, she thought. As the man's trembling hands reached toward a fragile crystal flower, he suddenly drew back. "No," he whispered hoarsely. "I can't do it." He buried his face in his hands with a sob. Nancy hurried to his side. "Morgan," she said softly. The man whirled and gave a gasp. "Don't be afraid," she said quickly. "Let me help you." He groaned and sank into a chair beside the cabinet. "How can you know all this?" I know part of it, she replied. Where is the gang? You were to let them in, weren't you? The man stared at her, amazed. Yes, but Thorn changed his mind. He said I should steal the crystal flowers and deliver them in this special case he gave me. I used to be pretty good at lockpicking, he added, flushing miserably. That's how Thorn got his hold over you, isn't it? Nancy asked. He knew you'd been in prison, and he helped forge your references. The houseman nodded. I wanted to go straight, and I did. I wouldn't hurt the Cornings for anything. But Thorn, he wouldn't leave me alone. Kidnapped me, held me on a big estate. Said the Larkspur would be the signal for this theft. I'd have to deliver, or else. There's a Mrs. Eldridge being held prisoner there, too, said Nancy. Did you see her? Eldridge, Morgan repeated. I think I heard the name, but... Suddenly he broke off. Listen, there they are! The sound of a low whistle came from outside. Nancy flew to the switch and snapped off the light in the crystal case. I'll close it, Morgan whispered. The door clicked shut. What shall I do? He stammered. Listen, Nancy said quickly. We'll have to get them in here. I have a trap set, but you must go out and tell the men you need help, that you're too weak to carry all the loot. They'd never believe me. I'm no good at acting. There must be some way to get them in here, Nancy declared. Suppose you just don't go out. Morgan gave a bitter laugh. They'll go away, and then, in a day or so, I'll disappear and never come back. Thorn will see to that. He won't stand for any double cross. Nancy had an idea. Come with me. She led the way into the hall. At once, the kitchen door opened. What's up? George whispered. Where's the gang? Nancy drew Morgan into the dark kitchen and explained to the girls. But I've thought of a way to lure the gang into the house, she said. If they find out I wasn't injured and I'm still working on this case, they'll come after me. Bess caught her breath. You don't mean you'd let them know? Morgan will tell them, said Nancy. Bess, you stay here, and George will take over the door of the TV room. I'll go out with Morgan. If they don't believe him, I'll let them see me and then run in here. That should do it. No, said the houseman. I won't let you, Miss Drew. Adam Thorne is dangerous. He will stop at nothing. It's too big a risk for you. I'm not afraid, said Nancy. Suddenly, Morgan darted away and ran through the utility room. Nancy dashed after him, calling, Morgan, come back! No, he called. I'm telling Thorne. I won't do it. I don't care what happens to me. Nancy raced outside and grasped the panting man. Thorne, he called. I won't do it. Morgan, Nancy cried frantically. Come inside. An instant later, powerful hands gripped Nancy's shoulders and swung her away from the houseman. She reeled and fell backward in the darkness. Nancy struck the gravel driveway hard and blacked out. End of chapter 13.